Now some biophysics. This is I'm going to make sure it's very complicated, very detailed, very simple. You've heard of amino acids, and you've heard of proteins. Amino acids are small molecules, like links on a chain. When you bind them together chemically, one amino acid to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, that long chain of amino acids is called a protein. That's what proteins are. When you eat protein, the acid in your stomach and also enzymes break down the protein. The long chain protein, the protein's a long chain of amino acids, just clips off the amino acids, or starts clipping in the center and at the ends, and just breaks up into all the different amino acids. Then your intestines absorb amino acids into your blood, into your cells, and then your cells use those amino acids how the cell wants to link them together to make proteins again. But here's the key thing about proteins for this discussion. That long chain of proteins has different amino acids in them. Some amino acids have a positive charge, some have a negative charge, some have no charge, some are like fatty. In other words, you know how you put a drop of oil into a cup of water, the oil stays together because fat and water don't mix. So some of them have that like fatty type of character. Water has charges to it. One end is positive, the other is negative. It's actually a V-shape, but don't worry about that. Whereas the fatty stuff has no charges to it. It's more like one blob. And the electrical charges and the fatty part don't attract each other. They actually repel against each other. They repel. That's why if you put a drop of oil in that water, the oil still stays together because it tries to stay chemically away from all the charges from that water. Now, take a long protein, all these amino acids. So some have positive charges, some have negative, some don't have any charges, some of that oily type nature. It's that long protein that could be many thousands of amino acids long. That long protein, that chain folds onto itself, where negative charges on some amino acids are attracted to positive charges on others. And then as they're trying to stretch that chain, there's resistance to it. And there's a fatty part of that chain that's attracted to another fatty part of the chain. They find each other. So it twists all onto itself. That's what a protein is. There's more things to it. It can be sugars attached, then I charge it. Okay. So the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-19, the mRNA that injects into your cells causes your cells to make 29 different proteins. So each of those proteins folds onto itself like a puzzle. And then there's 29 proteins because this one's folded this way, that's folded that way, and they find a lock onto each other. They will lock onto each other. And then all the 29 proteins that lock onto each other in the ways, excuse the word, but thermodynamically. Let's say this is positive. Let's say the two end fingers here are positive. These two are like fatty and that one's negative. So then if this one is negative, it's going to find it to be attracted to that positive. If this one is positive, attracted to that negative. And if these two are fatty, be attracted to that fatty, and similarly, and that they attract to each other. And it's not just on a flat surface, it's 3D that they're attaching. Now, they may not be perfect matches, right, for proteins. Some are not quite straight like that, and so they won't make a perfect match. So protein has the charges and the fatty parts lined up better than another one. They will tend to attach together. So those 29 proteins come together, and that's what makes the virus. Now, how does the virus infect you? On your cells, on the surface of your cells, you have another protein sticking up called a receptor with its charges and its fatty parts. And then you have, on the big COVID virus, you have one little part that's called the spike protein. And on that spike protein, there's one little part that's going to find that is matched up for the receptor in your cell. And when it finds it and it locks, then the cell pulls that piece with the rest of the virus into the cell. That's how the virus gets into your cell. So how do the antibodies work? Of this big 29 protein virus, when I say big, understand it's the diameter across is called, I hate to use scientific terms, it's 100 nanometers. That would be 10 to the minus 7. So it's 1/10,000,000th of a meter. This is a meter, break it into 10 million parts. It's much smaller than a cell. much smaller than a cell. So this big virus has this one of its proteins called the spike protein is the one that's going to attach onto the receptor of the cell and get pulled in. The way the antibodies work is the antibodies are also like proteins, small proteins called peptides, small proteins. They also have configurations. And as this virus is floating around and wants to try to find your cell, all of a sudden an antibody comes in and latches on to that part of the virus that would attach to your cell. Now, it can't attach your cell anymore because it's blocked. This whole big virus is blocked because that little part of the spike protein has an antibody on it and it's blocked, so it won't attach to your cell. Then the virus stays in your bloodstream, as any protein in the bloodstream does. It gets chewed up by enzymes, gets oxidized, gets broken down. So the way the vaccines work is the vaccines give you the mRNA for just the one spike protein. Let's now understand the anti-vaxxer claim of infertility and also understand how variants work. The vaccines give you the mRNA, in case of Pfizer and Moderna, for just one of those proteins. And that's what comes into your cell. Your cell makes more of it, ends up, your immune system sees it, the immune system learns what that big virus learns about that one little region that's going to try to attach to your cell. That's the antibodies that we're talking about. They'll attach to that part and block it. Now, let's go to infertility and then understand the variants. First, infertility. There's two anti-vaxxer propagandist doctors in Europe that sent a letter saying that when a woman gets pregnant, she has a placenta around the baby. They said there's one protein in the placenta of a woman who's pregnant that looks a lot like the spike protein. So if we give a vaccine of the spike protein and the body makes antibodies against the spike protein of COVID, maybe the immune system will also attack the protein that looks a lot like the spike protein in a placenta, and people won't be able to get pregnant. That's the anti-vaxxer thing. Here's the problems. First, it's totally wrong. First, I'll give you, as I learned in life, in science and medicine, and also running a pharmaceutical company, many times you can just logic your way through things and then see if the data also agrees with it. But sometimes the logic will just give you the answer anyway. So let me ask you this. All the governments of the world are pushing their entire population to vaccinate. If the governments think that it's going to cause infertility so that the people in their country can't make babies anymore, the country's going to die, right? That's the end of the country. If a country doesn't have any more population being made, the country's over. Do you think the United States government wants to commit suicide for the whole country? And Russia and Israel and France and Germany and Spain and Switzerland, Italy and Canada, they don't want to commit suicide? They know this doesn't cause infertility. Be real. Think with your head for a second. Here's the second argument you can make without even knowing the facts yet. The facts about the actual biology of it. The COVID is going to hit the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-2, is going to hit virtually every single human being in the world, period. It's that infectious. So you are going to get that one spike protein. You're going to get it anyway. Here's your two choices to get it. You can either get just the spike protein itself from a vaccine, where it can't hurt you because it's not the whole virus, it's just one of the 29 proteins. Or you can get the spike protein from the virus infecting you, and you're going to get all the other 28 proteins, and you're going to be infected. You can infect others. You might get sick, and you might die. And if you live, you may have long-term symptoms, long-term issues. So that's your choice. You're going to get the spike proteins. How do you want it? You want it the way that's healthy and easy and protects you, or the way that could kill you? Well, anti-vaxxers want the way that could kill you. Wonderful. And could infect other people. The research has already been done in the laboratory, looking at the antibodies that are formed against the spike protein from the injection, and see if those antibodies will bind to the protein that's in a placenta. Guess what? They don't bind. They don't bind. So it's just wrong. That whole anti-vaxxer thing about infertility is just wrong. Now, I want to read you something. that I haven't done this ever before. Read something I just took from an article from a physician. Okay, so reading off another laptop, and this is a article written in March, just 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, whatever, by a high risk fertility physician named Eve Feinberg at a website called statnews.com. And Dr. Feinberg writes the following: the vaccines were not tested in pregnant women or women who wanted to get pregnant in the first initial tests. So what they've done is they have an open registry of women who are trying to get pregnant or got pregnant or went to birth, and asked them if they had the COVID vaccine and what the results were on their pregnancies. So data from the V-Safe Pregnancy Registry with nearly 2,000 participants were also reassuring, with rates of miscarriage, stillbirth, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia or gestational hypertension, eclampsia, and intrauterine growth restriction lower among the people in the registry that received the vaccine than on the national average. In other words, again, this is not perfect science, and there's more scientific studies being done. But the way it looks like now is that by getting vaccinated, the rates of infertility, ability to get pregnant, to have full pregnancy, and go to full term, the rate, it actually is, there's a greater chance that the woman and the pregnancy will be successful if they've been vaccinated before pregnancy or during pregnancy, and is much greater than if they are not vaccinated. How do you like that? Oh, it causes infertility. Well, scientifically, we know it doesn't. And now, at least from this scientific study, which is not the greatest quality of science, it's what we have for now, it looks like the vaccine actually protects people to some degree against these things. Can I say it for sure yet? No. But evidence, we're not talking about anti-vaxxer propaganda, made up, psychotic, delusional stuff. The evidence so far is it helps protect people, women, and the babies before pregnancy, during, and through the end of pregnancy. So that's the truth of infertility. It does not make you infertile, and if anything, it's a greater chance that not getting vaccinated and getting COVID will make the person infertile. By the way, we've heard this anti-vaxxer lies before. What was the first major anti-vaxxer outcry? What was the big one? It was that vaccines cause autism. And so they had a fraudulent study by a doctor in Britain whose license was taken away and who was later found to be complete fraud, and he was being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by a law firm who wanted to be able to sue drug companies for vaccines. And that's where he took the money from, and he's been totally discredited, except among the anti-vaxxer world. And what they said, vaccines cause autism. Since then, actual, real, legitimate, reliable scientific studies have been done across millions of children. Millions. What did they show? They showed that the children who got vaccinated had a low, we're not talking about COVID, we're talking about MMR, measles, mumps, rubella. The children who got vaccinated had a lower rate of autism than those who did not get vaccinated. Now, are we saying that vaccination protects against autism? No, because scientifically, unless the numbers come up and the differences come up substantial enough, given the number of people and the variability and the scientific mathematical test for this. So we can't say for sure that getting vaccinated protects against autism. But we could definitely say for sure that getting vaccinated does not cause autism, because the numbers of autism in people who don't get vaccinated is higher. If they do get vaccinated, the chance of autism are lower. Okay, moving on. I'm going to try to go a little more quickly, even though there's major stuff to tell. But talk about the variants. Now, I showed you how the spike protein, that's the one protein from the virus that wants to attach to your cells, and it's all wound up and has its own little site that's going to attach to your receptors, and they get blocked, right? Get blocked by antibodies. But they have a shape to them. A charge here, a positive charge here, a negative charge there, positive charge up here, a little fatty area there, negative charge over there, and they like interlock. When it's coming, finds another receptor that can interlock with and be bound with all different charges holding it together. Now, there are two types of variants. What it means is that those amino acids all along the protein, one of them gets changed from the original Chinese strain. Second one, third one, you have all kinds of variants. This is because genetic mistakes occur when you're reproducing so many proteins, and the mRNA can get changed, and then that can make new viruses just because of reproducing the mRNA. I should say, not the proteins, the mRNA. When that gets reproduced, can have mistakes. Now, those mistakes, if you can understand it, because it could take a positive charge here, make it negative, or take a negative charge there and make it fatty, that will now change the attractions of the amino acids to themselves, to each other. So that long chain may fold in a bit of a different way than it would with the regular amino acids in it. When it folds, this is what biophysics studies, is how the change in the shape of molecules in living things, how the changes in the shape affect how they function. For example, my research was a small part of understanding how the sodium channel, with the shape and the look is of a sodium channel, which is a protein in all the cells of your body. And when you move anything, there are electrical signals that hop down. That's because these sodium channels, which are proteins, they open up. They're like this, only they open up. They make a hole that sodium can rush the outside of the cell to the inside of the cell, changing that area from negative to positive, and that electrical charge leaps down. Okay, that's aside. So there's two types of variants. One type of variant, meaning changes in amino acid here, there, wherever, that causes the folding to change, especially when it comes to the spike protein, the part that's going to try to attach to your cells. Now, most variants make the virus ineffective, not able to affect anybody, not able to do anything, and they just go away because they don't reproduce in other people. But there's two types of variants. So one variant makes the virus attach more strongly onto the receptors of your cells. So it's a much better match of the shape and the charges of that spike protein onto your cell. More tightly binds there. And also maybe other changes that can escape other antibodies out there. So that's the UK version, United Kingdom, and the Brazilian version. And the problem with them are that they are changed, that they bind so much more tightly to cells that they're now infecting younger people and children. Many doctors thought don't need to get vaccinated. And now they're coming down with COVID. And now the spike that's happening in the United States, or 60,000 a day, 70,000 a day, a lot of them are children or very young adults, which is very frightening. So it's like we're open to a whole new wave there. But the antibodies from the vaccines will block that spike protein. So whether it's the Wuhan version, the original one, the wild type is called from China, or whether it's the UK version or the Brazilian version, the changes are made, but on the spike protein, it's going to try to attach onto your cell. Antibodies from the vaccines will still block that spike protein, still block it and stop it from hitting your cell. That's great. That's one type of variant. And in press, physicians speaking, they talk too ambiguously about this. That's one type of the variant. The ones that will infect, they're more infectious, they'll infect more people more quickly, spread more easily, but they are blocked by the antibodies, or carried the antibodies. Then there's another type of variant. And that other type of variant, which is the South African variant, and one of those changes is also seen in the New York variant. And now the spike protein itself, remember, the virus is 29 different proteins, but in one spike protein itself is actually two proteins together. One of them, which binds to your receptors, that one protein has 1,273 different amino acids. So there's each of these links in the chain, there's 1,273 different amino acids with different charges, positive, negative, no charge at all, fatty-like, all along it. And it folds up, and only one part is going to bind to your receptors. Unfortunately, in amino acid number 484, and that 1,273 amino acids, in amino acid E484. It's called E484K. It is a glutamine or glutamate amino acid, gets substituted, got changed, and now it's a lysine that changes the charge, which means it changes its binding. And what happened now is antibodies from the vaccines don't bind to that anymore. They just slide off. And that thing can then come onto your receptors of your cells and get on there and infect people. Now, I've been very concerned about this, and a lot of doctors are concerned about this. So concerned that Pfizer and Moderna, they're working on a booster shot. You've heard about that? You're going to have to get a third shot, a booster shot. It's not a booster. It's a new shot. It will look almost exactly like the old shot, the old vaccine, but it will have in its mRNA a few changes to match that South African E484K change. Now, when we get a flu shot each year, because there's new strains of the flu that come, do we say, oh, we're getting a flu booster shot? No, we're getting the new flu shot. This will be the new COVID shot. Oh, by the way, people who also had COVID before and have antibodies, that doesn't stop the South African version. Looking at it in the test tube, it has greatly reduced effectiveness. Now, I'm not saying antibodies have no effectiveness against this at all for a couple of reasons. One is, I'm trying to think of an example of this. It's called kind of like competitive inhibition or PKs. I don't want to talk science, but it's binding affinities, equilibriums. Here's what it is. If I put a nut out on the ground and I have a squirrel that wants to get it, and I have a slow-moving animal, called an opossum. I'm assuming a squirrel runs much faster than an opossum. I say, all right, let them both go. Who's going to get the nut? The squirrel. Bang! Well, the opossum is waddling over there. The squirrel. Bang, bang, bang! God's got it. Okay, right? But what if I let go in the backyard where that one nut is, one squirrel and 1,000 opossums? They're all over the place. Some of them are going to be right near the nut. By the time the squirrel tries to jump over, one of the opossums close to it already got the nut in his mouth. Because I just swarmed the place. I carpet bombed it with opossums. And they were able to get there. So now, the issue with the South African variant, that, like I said, is also seen in the New York variant, is that it takes a much higher concentration of the antibodies that we currently have to try to keep pushing onto that spot to keep it off of the receptor. So the antibodies don't have as strong of an attraction, but it has a little bit of attraction. And if you put so many antibodies out there, it can interfere. But you need a lot of antibodies, a high concentration to do it. Which, by the way, might be one of the reasons why people who've already had COVID, who I've thought really maybe don't need to get vaccinated, which is not what the CDC says. CDC says everyone should get vaccinated because the vaccination will give you many, many, many times higher levels of antibodies than the infection typically will. But it's still a concern. And what I find disturbing and suspicious is how information is not coming out from medical sources and from the government about infections of people who previously had COVID with the South African version or other versions like New York that have that 484 amino acid change. And I don't understand why it's hard to get that information. I mean, we should be able to say either, the South African version is just not spreading. Nobody's getting it. It doesn't matter if they already had COVID or they have the vaccination. They're just not getting it. Great, wonderful. And I have to tell you my own experience. I live in an Orthodox Jewish community, which is a very highly populated community and highly social. We're together 3 times every day in groups everywhere in the community, praying together. There's lots of kids, lots of play groups, schools opening up constantly. We're together for holidays, at kosher stores together. And so I'm using this community for my own, unofficial medical research to see if reinfection is occurring. And I'm hearing about a little case here or there. It wasn't a big deal, but there's been no mass reinfection. By the way, I'm not even sure you call it reinfection, right? They had COVID-19, the Wuhan version earlier, but now it's COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, with changes to it, with the South African changes. So it's really a different virus. Mostly the same, but it's actually a little different. So is it call it reinfection or call it a new infection of the new COVID? But keep your eyes out for this. If you start hearing about people who had COVID or had the vaccine and then they got sick with COVID again, now remember the vaccine, 1 in 20 people don't get antibodies. So it's not going to be one guy, one person there, you start to hear a trend like that, then look out, because then we're in for a complete resurgence of this whole thing all over again. I'm not saying it's going to happen. What I'm saying is we don't know yet. I don't understand why we don't have that data yet. It seems easy enough to me to be able to give out that data, and I don't know why it's not coming out from medical or government sources. So we shall see. But in South Africa, as far as I know, thousands and thousands of people who had the original Wuhan COVID got infected with the new South African version. And they had a huge spike. And also, in a country next to South Africa, Zambia, where the South African version spread, it was 16 times more infectious. Not 16%, 16 times, 1,600% more infectious, spread like wildfire. It's not spreading like wildfire here yet, as far as I know, but watch out for that.